Are you recording? Recording and transcription.
Just started it.
Got that started? Roll call, Daniel Krim present, Jen Hanks.
Here.
Kevin Hayes.
Here.
Stella Hollander will not be joining us. Hi.
Hey, how's it going? I'm here.
Awesome. Sam Meyer
I'm here.
and Val Pyatt. You said Val might join us later, Martin?
Yes, she's expected. Yeah.
Any announcements from the BAC?
I have a small announcement to make related to the work I've been doing for the Route 66 trail.
Yeah.
So I told you guys back in the day, I emailed ADOT on my own, right? And told them I did it just on the side related to Steve's Boulevard. They fixed the light and then I said, and they told me that it was fitting within some process they were doing. And I said, well, great. Responded to them and said, well, hopefully you can look at Ponderosa Parkway also. Ponderosa Parkway is set up now to do that.
Okay.
Don't know if it was related to me or not, but it has been set up to do that. Steve's Boulevard was set back to the light. So I emailed them again.
When did that happen? Do you know?
Yeah, about a month and a half ago, I'd say. It went back.
Okay.
And so I emailed them again and they kind of started ghosting me. But then I went to RNA Auto today and the light is working. And the Steve from RNA said there were members there working on that light all day. So I think they fixed that light and Ponderosa Parkway. So what that means is if we can get Fanning, that one intersection at Fanning, to turn green, then we will have the entire Route 66 trail from the mall all the way to downtown Flagstaff, where it will be green, crosswalk on green. If we encourage people, which I think we should do, to not use the 4th Street intersection. They should do that 4th Street bypass, right? That little turn that goes under, it passes Texas Roadhouse too. It's a much better path. And so if we had that, then that entire trail would be set and ready to go. And so I'm hoping to communicate and start talking with the traffic engineers about that one light. And I'll make sure they know that I'm doing it on my own and not a part of the committee, just to finish what I've been doing. So
I would predict that the Arizona Daily Sun would like to have a reporter interview you, and you're mentioning that 4th Street bypass would be great, and then everybody who reads the paper would know about it.
well, I was hopeful to, what I'm hoping to do, frankly, just between you and me, is meet, try to get them to work on that light and then absolutely do that. Write either a letter to the editor article about how that path has been built and how the city and ADOT are trying to make streets safer for bike.
One thing, if you do get in front of a reporter, it would be great to identify Flagstaff's status as a bike friendly or bike semi-friendly or bike unfriendly community. I mean, I think people, are we rated as a bike friendly community?
Yeah, Martin, we have silver.
I thought. Pardon?
Silver?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. We've been silver for a number of years. Actually, our application is coming due later this year, and so we're working on kind of convening a group to rewrite it and resubmit it. And hopefully we can we'll be able to move up, but we'll see.
Awesome. So anyway, that was my update.
Daniel, I have some random things I've heard about. Would you like to hear about them?
Rumors.
Bike related.
Rumor.
They're more than rumors. There's a group of folks on campus who are working on organizing. I have seen different names for it, but either a green transportation week or a clean commute to work week for the week after Earth Day. So the idea is to try to, I believe they've been in touch with someone from sustainability, I want to say, maybe also you folks, to encourage folks who work or study at NAU to use alternate transportation to get to campus for that week. So I think that is the April, I say 21st to 25th. So if you know anyone who works at NAU, that is a good thing to share with them. I think there will be more marketing. They are focusing pretty heavily from the initial planning that I've seen on bicycle safety too. They're planning to offer some courses or like little, I don't know, single-hour lecture demonstration classes. I think mostly geared at students to talk about how you ride a bike and the laws that you should follow when you ride a bike or use a micromobility device. I've encouraged them to reach out to the LCIs in the community, the League Certified Instructors from the League of American Bicyclists, to see if they can act as a resource. I have no idea if they're going to do that or not, but they're supposed to be doing some kind of like safety demonstrations and lessons. Yeah, so
So does that group have a name or are they just a loosely?
I think it's a committee. The person.
NAUBAC.
Yeah, I think it maybe was, I cannot tell who started it. Aaron Stam, who's the Director of Transit Services at NAU, is involved, and also Eric Nielsen from NAU, if folks know him. I could not tell you exactly how it came into being, but that's potentially happening. So that's just sort of for people's information.
Well, if they want to send somebody over to make an announcement here, it will reach 9 or so people.
Well, I announced it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay. And similarly, I think there are plans in the works for the first Friday in May to do a car-free First Friday where they would shut down part of Aspen. And part of the idea for that is also to encourage people to bike, walk, or use transit to downtown for First Friday. I have not heard a lot more from that, other than that I believe it's being supported by an ArtX grant and is done in conjunction with the Downtown Business Alliance, or DBA.
Oh, nice.
So if I hear more, I'll let you know. But you should show up. And I believe there's going to be surveys at both of these things. So again, if you have a reason to be on campus to, fill out surveys in support of, multimodal transportation, that would be good. Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, great.
It's the same committee?
No,
But this one.
different
Oh,
effort. I just
okay.
know about, these are just things I know about.
Oh,
Is the second one affiliated with the university or?
No.
No, okay.
Oh, that's a Downtown Business Alliance and
Yeah,
ArtX.
Yeah, I believe. I think it is still being finalized. I got an email about it. That's what I can tell you.
So that one doesn't have a survey?
I think they are planning to have a survey. I think both of them are intending to have surveys, from what I've heard from the folks who've been involved, to try to collect information for the First Friday event. Last I heard, the plan, which was Dre DeRudo, if folks know him, Dapper Dre. He was, was to have a survey both for business owners in downtown to basically say, did you like this? What were benefits to your business? What were costs to your benefits? And for people who attend to say, did you like this? Did it feel safer? All those different kinds of things. If I hear more, I'll let you all
Yeah,
know.
first Friday of May.
Yes, so I think it's May 4th, 5th,
So is Earth Day on a Sunday?
2nd? I don't know what time it is. I have it on my calendar. Earth Day is the 19th, April.
It's Saturday. Oh.
Yes.
I have a quick question. The signal protected pedestrian crossings that have the, I'm not sure what they're called, where they have the median and the signal button in the middle, so you have to push it twice.
Yeah, the blinking clocks or
Yeah.
whatever.
So I guess I was just wondering, I saw someone using one the other day, and they pushed the first one, cars stopped, they got to the median, and cars started stopping. on the other side, and they were stopped for them. But they didn't push the button again, and someone behind the stopped car rear-ended the first stopped car. So I was wondering, yeah, like, is there a legal obligation to push that second button or the button at all? Or is that just like, I don't know if anyone knows.
Know that we have anybody from the police department, but my understanding is the person in the crosswalk is protected when they're in the
Yeah.
cross.
Okay.
Light there, or if there's a controlling mechanism. I mean, it's nice if there's a controlling mechanism, but
Yeah.
also you're not allowed to rear end people.
Yeah. That was my thought. Yeah. Totally. And,
Failure to control speed 12 or 28701A. Yes.
And the second thing was, I don't know, what to do with this information, and maybe it's best, it's more just like an anecdote, but I actually like witnessed a bicycle, like, car involved hit and run a couple weeks ago, and it was really gnarly. I mean, the person seemed to be okay, but yeah, that was my first time seeing somebody hit by a car like that. And
What was the intersections?
yeah, it was Arrowhead and Route 66. It's because I live in Sunnyside. I was actually driving, and I was in the left turn lane, and it was a red light. And the cyclist was at fault. They crossed the crosswalk when they didn't have the right of way as the light was changing. I mean, they didn't have any lights or a helmet or anything, but yeah, I guess somebody didn't see them and hit her like, I would probably like 20 miles per hour, and it was like right next to me, so I was like the first person to get to her, but luckily a lot of people got out, and like EMS was there within 3 minutes, and she was really shaken up. But I have wondered about that intersection for some time, just because there's a crosswalk on one side and not the other. I've
And
never
that
had.
crosswalk is really short,
Yeah.
that button, like, you
Yeah,
have to sprint to make it across that 7 lane.
yeah. I've never personally had a problem with it, but I don't know if I'm sure other people have had different experiences. I mean, at least if you're going to Sunnyside from the Route 66 bike path, you kind of have to go to the crosswalk and then cross again once you turn onto Arrowhead to get to the right side of the road. But that wasn't what caused this particular incident. But yeah, just be safe out there.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen that intersection. What it does is it uses the smart like systems, right, to count cars behind the vehicles. And so if you don't press that crosswalk and only one car goes in, it's a 4-second light and then it turns red. So if you're a bike and you're like, I can speed through, you're not gonna make it, right? So you get.
Yeah. But yeah, kind of crazy that the person just drove away without stopping.
It is.
Super unfortunate. But anyway, that's all.
Were the police, did the police show up? Or did
The
they
police
act?
showed up. They took a statement from someone who saw the car better. But I mean, it was over 10 minutes at that point since they had left, and I don't know how they could find the person, but it was like a silver Mazda or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I was definitely impressed with the response of like first responders, and just like normal citizens involved. Like, people rallied really fast.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, very, I will say, just from an insurance perspective, it's kind of a side note, but I've worked on cases like these.
Mm.
So if the woman on the bike was, not at fault and there was a hit and run, and she has a car and she has car insurance, and on her car insurance, she has what's called uninsured motorist coverage. As long as there's a witness to it, her underinsured motorist coverage on her car insurance will cover her damages.
Hmm.
Oddly enough, I don't know. I digress.
Wow. And hospital and all that stuff.
Yeah, hospital and pain, suffering and lost wages. Yep.
Wow.
So uninsured motorist coverage, if you don't have it on your insurance, get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, she was able to walk, but it was a scary scene.
Any other announcements from the BAC? Before I turn it over to the public? How about the public? Any announcements from the public? Public comments? Going once, going twice? Yeah, anything for us?
No, I'm here on behalf of Flagstaff City Council, and I report back to the council on the wisdom that's shared here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to have you here, David. Do we have meeting minutes to approve? Is that a phantom item on our?
It's attached.
That's a phantom item. We'll get caught up with for the.
We'll
March
table
meeting.
that for now.
Yeah.
That's a promise. Those two things listed there is a promise.
All right, pedestrian and bicycle crash data report. Look at my veins. Who's doing that one? Is that you, Carlton?
Martin's taken over. We're taking him in his undisclosed location.
Right.
Him away from more interesting stuff.
Let's see if I can successfully share this. How's that?
That is on the alternative screen.
I can switch that. This is. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so just a quick bit of background. This is actually I think the third time we've updated this report. The first time we did it before the active transportation master plan, and then a couple of years ago we updated it through 2021. So this is a bit of an update from that. I don't know in the future moving forward if it's worthwhile doing this every year or if we should set our sights on every other year, or exactly how often it ought to be updated. I guess part of the answer to that question is what do we end up using with what do we end up doing with the information? How do we end up using it? And maybe that will suggest how often it ought to be done. We get this data from ADOT. ADOT collects it statewide and makes it available kind of in a more uniform data status. They get it from all the local law enforcement agencies. So in Flagstaff PD, Coconino County Sheriff's Office, and NAU PD all send in their crash reports to the state. The state compiles it and sends it back to us. It's kind of interesting. I think one thing we could do with the information is work with PD a little bit more closely on what we see and what can be done about it. PD, because they're the ones who share that information, they actually have kind of a richer data set, at least for crashes that they investigate than we get back from the state. Like they might be able to fill in some of the information or add to the information, I guess, that we can get back from the state. Anyway, I'm going to kind of go through these things and highlight some of the things that we see. I'd encourage you to do the same. Like if something in the data struck you as being unusual or asking for some kind of an answer or explanation, then bring that up. Think of this data as being this is a lot of data, and I'm not going to tell you that all of it is interesting. I don't think all of it is telling us something that is interesting. But think of it kind of as a data screen. So we go through all the data and then see what's interesting about it. And then as a next step, what we're thinking of doing is kind of going into more depth to try to get a little bit more explanation or a clearer idea of what's going on, or maybe to a point where we have some operational information that we can do with the crash data. So think of that as we go through the data, like what kind of pops out, what seems significant, and how could we follow that up with more in-depth exploration of that data. I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, we'll look at where there are high crash locations around town, either street segments or intersections, and we could go more into depth about each one of those locations to see what kind of crashes are occurring, if there's any commonalities to identify a potential problem. For example, we'll see that the intersection of 66 and Ponderosa has a lot of bicycle crashes. And one might guess, we don't know this yet, we can look into it, that there might be those might be a lot of bicyclists on the foot trails and vehicles turning right across their path of travel. But that's the sort of thing that we could tease out if we go into more depth. We can get to a point where we can get into really detailed information about how crashes are occurring, like to the point of like which direction are vehicles going and are they making a right turn, for example. So we could pin it down almost to one corner of an intersection if we know that that intersection is a problem. It gets a little bit tricky for a couple of reasons. One, that the data is just in the form of a bunch of fields with kind of single word answers to it. So it's not always possible to get a really good idea of what happened in an individual crash. If we wanted to, we could pull the actual crash report, which includes a narrative that gives us the detail of what actually happened. Then the second thing that becomes kind of problematic is we get down to there's not a ton of crashes that makes up this data set, and so we start dividing it up. We get to such small numbers that it may be hard to tell anything from. If we only have 2 or 3 crashes, that doesn't really necessarily indicate a problem or a trend. So I'll stop there for a moment. So this is really kind of a draft, kind of that first cut, like I said, a screen. We'll highlight the things that we find significant, and then try to add to the data that we have by going into a little bit more depth for the final version of this. I should mention too that we got as far as updating the data in this report, but that a lot of the text is still left over from last time. So just ignore the text for the moment and concentrate on the data. So I'll pause there for a moment, just see if there are any questions, comments, thoughts at this time.
Is this data helpful to you in your grant writing to
Absolutely.
where the need is? I mean, if you're asking whether or not we should continue to compile reports like this, I think they're very useful in a number of different ways, but that's the one that kind of jumps off the page at me.
Yeah. I mean, like the Butler Avenue grant, for example, we highlighted the bike and ped crashes along the Butler corridor, and that was a significant component because one of the purposes of the grant is to help make it safer for peds and bikes. So if we can show that we're making improvements to do that on a corridor that already has a lot of crashes, that really helps. There are some grants like the Highway Safety Improvement Program that requires you to show crash data. Like you have to have a crash history before you get funding. So yes, absolutely, this does. I mean, really in 2 ways. One, it identifies where potentially we should be going after grant funding. If there's a particular problem that could be solved with an infrastructure improvement, and we can get a grant for that, then so much the better. But then it definitely helps with the grant application too.
Just want to make a quick comment. When you talk about wanting to do this report every year, every other year, and that example you talked about was Ponderosa Parkway and Route 66, they just changed that light. I wondered what that data will look like next year for that crash data. If they've changed that light specifically on that Route 66 road.
That's something we can definitely track.
Yeah.
They're in other places too. When we do infrastructure improvements, we can do kind of collect before and after data.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Martin,
again, it gets kind of tricky, again, because they're at any given intersection, there just aren't a ton of crashes, and you need probably a couple of years of experience after something goes in to really tell if it made a difference or not.
Sure.
Martin, I was just gonna ask, if you do pull the crash reports, do you then code those, or do you sort of evaluate them more qualitatively, or what do you? For example, if you were gonna pull Ponderosa and Route 66, which I think would be a great one to examine,
Yeah.
would you then develop like a coding system for those reports to say, for example, these mostly happened when people were turning right? Or what would you do with the report data, or what have you done?
Yeah, I think just that, like you can get the like exactly what part of the intersection were they at? Where was the vehicle? Was it turning? Was it going straight? Where was the cyclist or pedestrian? Even down to which corner, and what kind of crashes are occurring. So that's the kind of data that we would pull. And like I said, some of that we can get out of the aggregated crash data, but like typically, if you're really looking at an intersection, you would pull the reports and see exactly what's happening.
Yeah, then I would agree. I would think that kind of analysis would be really helpful for intersections specifically, since this version of the report and previous versions note that most bicycle crashes happen in intersections. So understanding what about the design of the intersection is contributing
Yeah.
to the crash, I would think would be quite helpful.
Even the time of day, and I mean, various factors like
Yeah.
that, if you could draw some commonalities. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think-
absolutely. So as we move through the data, like think about those things, and let's talk about what we want to do next with the data, and we can't we can't do everything. So what are kind of the highlights, and what should we be looking at next? Um, intersections being a good one for sure, to get kind of a better idea. But there might also be some other things that we can look at to get a clearer idea or a better picture of what's going on. So any other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, I'll start going through. I won't go through the introduction, but I encourage you to read it just to kind of get an idea of what this data includes and what it doesn't include. It's interesting when Kai was relating his experience with the hit and run. Um, what occurred to me, ultimately the police came, so a police report was created in that case, and after a time it will appear in this data, that particular crash. A lot of times things happen and everything seems all right. The cyclist may have been, or the pedestrian may have been shaken up, but they're unhurt. And I suspect in a lot of cases that the police aren't called, and we have no record of that incident. And I guess I would encourage us all to make sure that the police are involved, so we start to collect that data, because I think that makes a difference. These are terrible events, really, and I know sometimes that getting the police involved seems like a unnecessary extra step. People want to kind of get on with their lives and move forward, but the data is helpful to us, and I think this is not just here, but in a lot of places, that this data is sort of acknowledged as being an incomplete picture of what's happening out in the real world. And the other thing that that doesn't get captured are near misses. So if something was close to a crash, it doesn't, for the purpose of this data, it doesn't count. Anyway, there's more detail in this introductory section. I'll go through and make sure that it's up to date. I think for the most part, it is still relevant, even though this is from the last crash report. And then these are kind of the highlights that we pulled out from last time. Again, this needs to be updated. So you guys will just jump in and interrupt me if you have a question. I can't see the chat or the room, but just let me know if somebody has a question, or just jump in.
Bart,
So here's-
can you make it a little bigger?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
that's perfect.
That's better.
That better? Okay.
Yep.
These are crashes over time, and we have data going all the way back to 2001, so we get some pretty good trend lines. What strikes me about these three charts is that bike and vehicle both seem to be going down generally. This being kind of a trend line, where pedestrians are don't seem to be staying more or less the same. You can see that the number of crashes varies pretty significantly from year to year, kind of bounces all over the place. And I think with numbers that are, kind of in this range, that's bound to happen. I think you kind of have to, this trend line over time helps see what's going on, but from year to year, it's kind of difficult to tell. I will say that ped crashes look like they've gone up the last 4 years, and bike crashes were starting to go up, but last year dropped off pretty significantly for whatever reason. And in fact, really since 2015, it seems like it's been fewer bike crashes. One thing we don't have as a basis of comparison is exposure rates. So we don't know what the crash rate, we know how many crashes occur, but we don't know what that rate is. Like how many cyclists, what percentage of cyclists, or what percentage of miles made by bicyclists result in crashes. And this doesn't really tell us that. We can look generally at kind of our mode share numbers to see how many people are walking and biking, and do a comparison based on that. But that's more kind of anecdotal rather than numeric, if that makes any sense. Keep going on.
You go back to that last slide. It's just so odd to me on the bicycle crash, how in 2014 to 2015, it just fell off the map like that.
Yeah.
Just makes me think that there's, I was here in 2014 and I don't remember anything happening that would cause it to drop. Was there a change in the way they were reported, or?
That's possible. I'm not aware of anything, although that is a possibility.
That's really an anomaly.
I think in the next meeting or two, we'll look at the mode share numbers that I referenced to see how many people are walking and biking, what percentage of trips are made by walking and biking. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, we'll see what the latest numbers show, but over the last couple of years, like fewer people are biking, basically. So this trend line may be a reflection of that, is that fewer people are biking. I think you're right, Danielle. That is kind of an interesting drop from, you can see we had 5 years where they were fairly high, and then followed by 5 years where they were fairly low, at least in terms of numbers. We may never know the answer.
Yeah. That's the fun about statistics.
Indeed. So this is a heat map that shows concentrations of ped crashes, and then a similar one for bike crashes. You can kind of get an idea of some locations here. We'll see that we actually have it broken down by specific locations further on in the report. Here's the information by injury severity. So crashes are divided into 5 categories for injury severity. At the bottom is called property damage only, or no injury. Then it goes up through possible injury, suspected minor injury, suspected serious injury, and then fatal crashes. And a lot of grants and programs and other things are primarily concerned with the top two categories, serious injuries and fatal crashes. This shows each one of those categories percentages. Really no surprise, but a very small percentage of ped and bike crashes are no injury compared to vehicles where 4 and 5 are fender benders essentially. So if you're a ped or a bike in a crash, you're much more likely to experience some sort of injury. For pedestrians, 1 in 11 is fatal, which is pretty significant. This shows the
Or it doesn't get reported, like you were talking earlier.
Right.
yeah. I mean, like with the so a lot of no injury crashes for ped and bikes, like Carlton said, may just not get reported. The other thing, if you look at the definition of what a crash is, for a property damage only crash to appear in the data, a property damage only or no injury, there has to be $1,000 worth of property damage, and it's hard to imagine a pedestrian getting hit by a car and causing $1,000 worth of damage to the car without suffering some form of injury. So, I mean, part of that is the nature of the data.
Have to wear fancier clothes and then get them ripped.
I'm actually pretty familiar with crash reports. I see a lot of crash reports. And a lot of times what happens is that when the person who is hit by a car or in a car accident are talking to the police, they're absolutely in shock. And they have adrenaline like flowing through their system, and they are injured and they don't feel injured. And they tell the officer that no, I think I'm fine. And I mean, I work on these cases for a year later, they're still in physical therapy, and they definitely had in between a minor injury and a serious injury. There's people that I know have had surgery after. I mean, there's people who have had broken bones, and it's a possible injury because they're just like, yeah, my arm hurts a little bit, but they're if you've been in a car accident or hit by a car, your immediate reaction isn't a lot of times you don't feel pain. You really don't. You have so much adrenaline running through your system. You got that fight or flight thing going on that it's very hard for an officer at the scene of an accident to really tell if someone is injured or not. And it's kind of a repeating story that I see in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the limitations of the data, really.
Yeah, they're not talking to people 2 days later, or even 3 hours later. They're talking to them 10 minutes after they've been in this major. I mean, I've seen people get in major car accidents and they're out in the middle of the street, picking up their kids' toys out of the street saying, no, I'm fine. I just need to get these toys picked up. And they're just completely in shock and they don't know what's going on. And a lot of times it's difficult for the officer to tell if someone's been injured or not.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people say, no, I'm fine.
Yes. So keep all that in mind. That I mean that the data is helpful, but it's not perfect. It doesn't answer all the questions for us. This shows the geographic locations by injury severity. So we kind of go through shades of red, and then the green is fatal. This is pedestrian. So there are many more pedestrian fatalities than bike fatalities, and these are where they're located. Last year, or 2 years ago, when we did this report, based on this corridor out by the mall, we applied for and received a road safety assessment through ADOT, which is getting underway. But we kind of wanted to understand like what is happening that we have this many pedestrian fatalities along that corridor. And hopefully the road safety assessment will help us kind of answer that question and make some suggestions. If there are reasons that can be discerned why that many pedestrians have died along that corridor, and if there are infrastructure things that can be done, then we'll know through that process. Here's bikes. In the last 10 years, only 3 bike fatalities. You can see where this is on Solier, actually not. It looks like it might be I-40. And then this, zoom back in for you. This shows serious injury crashes per year for peds in green, bikes in blue, and then vehicular crashes in gray. And then fatal crashes. And probably, really the thing to take away from this chart is that the numbers are fairly variable from year to year. So here for serious injury, 10 pedestrians in 2020, but only 4 in 2019. And that's just kind of the nature of crashes. If we look at all fatalities, this always is kind of a shocking statistic to me, but all fatalities that happen in traffic crashes, 39% are pedestrians. Age and gender. Here we compared, these were pedestrians, bicyclists, drivers, and then this last row is for all of Flagstaff, so how the population breaks down. It's actually a little bit less pronounced this time around. But you can see in the 18 to 24 category, 31% of Flagstaff's population falls into that. But 36% of bicyclists who are in crashes fall into that. And then similarly for 25 to 44, it's 26% of the overall population, but 34% of bicyclists in crashes. So for bike crashes, at least, the age skews a little bit younger than the general population. For pedestrians, it looks like it's almost the opposite. The age of pedestrians skews a little bit older than the general population. And then drivers, it's a little bit tough to tell because, we only have a small percentage of drivers are under 17. So you kind of see that reflected here. Gender, this has been fairly consistent from previous. It definitely skews male. Population is about 50-50. For bicyclists, it's about 75% male and 25% female. For pedestrians, even, it's 2/3 male and 1/3 female. For drivers, make of this what you will, but it's 55% male and 45% female.
Well, isn't it also the case that generally there are fewer women cyclists in most cities? Like there's a gender gap in bicycling.
There's a gender gap in cycling. Yep. I think that's what this data tells us. Yeah. If we add better numbers on who's cycling and how often, that we could actually do rates, I think that information would be probably brought forward, would be a little bit more obvious. I would guess that my guess, this is just a hunch, is that even if we normalize this by rates and took into account the gender gap in cycling, that there would still be more men involved in bike crashes than women. Just a hunch. Let's see. I'm going to blow this back up for a second. So we look at geography, and we break the city into different districts to see if there are what's going on kind of by different areas of the city. This has been consistent. The Central South, which includes South Side, And NAU campus tends to have the most crashes. And then the east has the most, kind of the second most. And here's for pedestrians. Here's for cyclists. So east is more problematic for pedestrians than it is for bicyclists, but still the second highest. Central south is just sort of consistently. And here it is for vehicles. So you can see central south and the east are the two biggest. We also break it down kind of like context or area. So we count 3 areas. One we call the core, the central area of Flagstaff, including downtown, NAU, FMC, et cetera. Then the rest of the city, and then the rest of Flagstaff, which is all the, Donny Park, Mountain Air, Kachina Village, et cetera. So for PEDs, it's somewhat evenly divided between the core area and the rest of the city. For bikes, there's more of a disparity. Many more crashes in the core than the rest of the city, and then very few outside the city. And then for vehicles, it's actually reversed. So there's more in the rest of the city and fewer in the core. And that, if you think about, I think there's ways to explain that if you think about it for a moment, why that happens. I mean, I think both of these are a function of where are people walking and biking. We can look at crashes on NAU. These are the total number of crashes. Ignore this graphic for a moment. It doesn't track with this data. But in that 10-year period, there were 20 bike crashes, 20 PED crashes, and 273 vehicle crashes within the geographic area that is campus. This is, and then if we compare that, the crashes on the NAU campus to crashes citywide, 6.6% of PED crashes happen on campus. 5.6% of bicycle crashes happen on campus, but only 1.6% of vehicle crashes happen on campus. Again, I think that is fairly easy to explain, that this is campuses where a lot of people are walking and biking.
And a 15-mile-an-hour speed
I was
limit.
gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, can you say that again? That 15 mile per hour
Everywhere on
speed
campus, I think it's a 15-mile speed limit.
limit? Yeah.
San Francisco's 25, everything else is 15.
I'm sure that helps. The last thing is we look at Flagstaff has 4 target neighborhoods that where at least 50% of the households are lower moderate income. And they are Pine Knoll, Plaza Vieja, South Side, and Sunnyside. And so we track ped and bike crashes to see how those neighborhoods are affected, kind of as a equity check. So here they are depicted graphically or geographically on a map. Plaza Vieja, Sunnyside, Pine Knoll, South Side, Pine Knoll, and Sunnyside. So here are PED crashes, significant percentage in South Side and Sunnyside. If we flip to bike crashes, still lots in South Side, but fewer in Sunnyside, then kind of smaller numbers in Plaza Vieja and Pine Knoll. And then kind of just as a comparison, we don't have vehicle crashes in those areas, but any thoughts on these numbers? I know we've known for a while that we have a lot of pedestrian crashes in Sunnyside. If we look at that, if I flipped all the way back to that kind of that heat map, we'd see some pretty good concentrations of PED crashes in Sunnyside.
The sidewalks in a lot of Sunnyside.
I was gonna say, also, are there fewer crossings, like fewer pedestrian crossings in Sunnyside for some major roads? Like we've talked about 4th Street before.
Yeah.
So there's more incentive to, cross not at a crosswalk if you have longer stretches of roads without.
Right.
Yeah. So that might be something, on the PED crash side that we could tease out is, what exactly is the situation in Sunnyside? Are those crashes occurring along 4th Street? Are they more interior?
Right.
Like, yeah, are they crossing crashes? What's actually going on in a little bit more detail? Is there something we can learn from that? Okay, then we get to locations and I should have warned you, I didn't update these tables. So these are the old data, but we did update these maps. So where there's a circle, that's an intersection. Where there's kind of a line, that's a street segment. And the numbers of crashes in the last 10 years are included either on that segment or in that intersection. So here's pedestrians. Here's bikes. So we see some pretty definite patterns.
Can you
it
zoom
seems
in
to
on that
me.
one, please? If you're able to.
Absolutely. That better?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd say our top three problems are Milton, Milton, and Milton
Yeah.
in terms of bike crashes. I mean, we can see, like every intersection pretty much has 3 or 4 crashes. Even the segments themselves have 9 crashes and 7 crashes. So I think at one time we did, I don't know the exact number, but it was some significant percentage of all the bike crashes in Flagstaff happened in Milton. I think we need to tease that out a little bit and, kind of maybe make a bigger deal out of it or maybe, get that information out to policymakers or grantors or whatever it is. That's a real problem. I mean, look at this corridor and the number of crashes that occur along it.
Martin, are those other, maybe you're just about to talk about this, but that like row of 4 and then the whole street segment that's 4 and then 8, is that Butler? What is that?
That's, I think, 66.
Is that
This is
66?
66, yeah.
Below that is Butler, then
And below that is Butler.
And what are they, Sawmill, right? Isn't that 9 is what they're working on now,
9, that's Sawmill?
isn't that?
I can't tell,
this
that's
is-
my math.
Sawmill, the area is here. Sawmill, the street is right here.
Oh, okay.
So what's 9? Is
That's
9
Butler, San Fran.
Butler, San Francisco? Okay. And then the 3 is Beaver, San Francisco, or Beaver, Butler?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
We'll plumb these for more detailed information, but definitely, San Francisco and Butler. What's happening? There's Ponderosa and Route 66. What's happening? And keep in mind, I mean, this number is 9, but this is over a 10-year period. I mean, so it's 9 bike crashes over 10 years. So it shows up, significantly compared to other intersections, but it is less than 1 per year. So any other thoughts, comments?
What's the Sunnyside intersection?
This is 6th and 4th.
Ah, yeah.
So let's quickly compare that to the PED crashes just to see. Yeah, actually, that one doesn't show up, but that corridor does.
Yeah.
And these intersections do.
Yeah, and that
And then-
4th Street and 66.
Is that the part of 4th where sidewalks cannot be put in because of property right issues? City doesn't have right of way. Is that same area?
It is right
Yeah.
here. So that's something that's a really good point, Sam. That's something we could look at to see if if there's those crash types are related to the absence of sidewalks, for example. And then there's one more map that shows kind of the combined ped and bike crashes. So pretty good number at the intersection of, this is Reardon at 66. Again, San Francisco and Butler has ped and bike crashes. Ponderosa and 66 shows up, but remember 8 of these are bike crashes. 1 was a ped crash.
Can you show us where the Milton underpass is going in?
Right here where that number 5 is, and then I would count, those are the 6 and the 5 are the 2 offset intersections. So this is University and 66, or Milton rather. And then this is the other university and Milton. So 11 crashes between the 2 intersections, which get combined into one as part of the that roundabout in the underpass. Other thoughts, comments? Go forward. Again, we got to update these tables. These were blank sheets because we used to have these divided into segments and intersection crashes, but now we have it on one map. So weather. What really this really tells us is that fewer people walk and bike when the weather's bad. Not too much to learn. Lighting conditions. So this has been consistent over the last couple of reports. A lot of ped crashes happen at night or in dark conditions. So one thing we could do, and fewer bike crashes because there's probably fewer people out biking at night. Compared to vehicle crashes are fewer. So we can look at the ped crashes and just highlight the ones that are this 38% that occur in the dark and map them basically and see if there are particular problem locations. Again, it gets a little bit tricky because we're down to 38% of all of our ped crashes, but maybe there's it tells us something about locations. And in the data, there are different fields for dark lighted and dark unlighted. But for the purposes of this analysis, we just combine them into they happened when it was dark. Service conditions, really kind of the same as weather. Fewer ped and bike crashes when the street is wet, snowy, or icy. Time and season. So let me go to the charts. A real spike in bike crashes in September compared to both pedestrian crashes and vehicle crashes. Both of them seem to be a little bit more consistent through the year, but definitely it builds to September. So I think one thing we can do is take a look at these September crashes. Imagine you have an idea of what you think might be going on, but we can check that geographically to see if it's related to students, the arrival of students back in town.
End of August, right? They get there.
Yeah, and the weather's still nice.
Weather's still nice.
They still
They're
know
new to
how to
biking.
drive, exactly.
Yeah, they don't know where to go.
They're new to campus, yeah.
By October, the Darwinism has taken full effect.
So that's something that we'll highlight this and then map to see. Maybe we'll take the combination of these 3 months, the 13%, 18%, and 12% of crashes for bikes, and see where they're occurring, if it's around campus or not.
Be a good time for, like you said, the training or the sessions or the, encouragement.
Yeah, that might give some impetus for that, right? Time of day, bikes peak at 3 to 6, which is really kind of matches vehicle crashes. So rush hour, likely. It's interesting because ped crashes are peak later, 6 to 9. I think this directly relates back to the percentage of ped crashes that we saw in the dark.
Yeah.
Right. So that becomes a visibility thing, I think, right? Pedestrians are more difficult to see. Day of week. It looks like a bit of a weekend kind of effect for both bike and vehicle crashes, more so than head crashes. Again, other than it being kind of interesting that there are fewer bike crashes on the weekend, I don't think that there's anything worth pursuing here, or that it can help us in any way. Roadway factors, I think somebody already alluded to this, but a significant number occur in intersections. And for this chart, we've combined intersections, driveways or alleys, and interchanges. Even if we take driveways or alleys and interchanges out, we still have, oops, sorry, that's still 57% of crashes happen at just pure intersections, 10 at driveways or alleys, and 9 at interchanges. So the overall is at 75% are at some form of intersection or interchange. For PEDs, it's just a little bit lower. For vehicles, it's significantly lower, but it's still more than half. But we can tell by this where the action is, right? Traffic control. We'll skip to bicyclists, and bicyclists and drivers in a crash will have different traffic control. We have 4 categories. Uncontrolled means that there was nothing, no stop sign, no traffic signalized, and then stop controlled are the other 2. And for bikes, 62% did not have any control. For cars or drivers, about a little under 50% had no control. And then a higher percentage were either stop controlled or signalized. I'm not sure what we can do to tease out more detail from this. I think there is already other points of data that kind of tell us what's happening with kind of some of this information. Keep going. Functional class really is just kind of a measure of how big the street is, how fast and wide. We haven't updated this data yet, but we will. You can see this is the information from last time. For bike crashes, most of the crashes occur on minor arterials or major collectors. Those are kind of our bigger streets. Major arterials include Milton and 66. So it's kind of, there's a percentage phenomenon occurring here that, only a small number of our streets are major arterials.
Right, but then your biggest crashes are on the one major arterial.
Yes, a significant number of this 20% might be Milton. Yeah, and then you can see. I think the other interesting piece here is that not nearly as many crashes happen on residential local streets. Of course, there may be fewer bikers on residential local streets as well. Okay, just a couple sections left. This one is called fault and violation. In every crash report, the officer who writes the report lists who is unit number 1 and who is unit number 2. And unit number 1 is always the one that is determined to be most at fault in a crash, and then unit 2 is below that. So if we look at that data, what it tells us in bike crashes, in about 65% of crashes, the driver was most at fault. And in 35%, the bicyclist was most at fault. For pedestrians, it's a little bit lower, 58% of drivers and 42% of pedestrians. I think what this tells us, more than anything, really, is that it's not always the bicyclist's fault. We shouldn't presume that. And if we're to be kind of effective in a safety campaign or educational campaign, that drivers have to be part of that. like 65, if 65% of crashes, drivers are most at fault. They need to be included in safety and education and enforcement. Other thoughts, concerns?
That's a really good point. I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but you're right.
One interesting thing on the pedestrian side, when we first did this, it was a significant number of drivers were most at fault, and now, a higher percentage of pedestrians are most at fault. And I'm almost half curious to kind of see if we can track that over time, just to see if that's changing.
Yeah.
And of course, that would just lead to more questions like why, if that were the case, like why are more pedestrians at fault getting into crashes? And then kind of a follow-up to that is we look at violations, and for the purposes of a crash report, a violation is not necessarily something that you were issued a ticket for, but just something that you did that contributed to the crash. It doesn't necessarily have to be illegal. And so what this tells us in bike crashes, 35% of bicyclists did nothing, did something wrong. 57% had no improper action, or at least in the opinion of the officer that was investigating, they didn't do anything wrong. And then for drivers, 54% did some violation, 33% had no improper action. This kind of is a different version of the data that we just looked at regarding who was most at fault. And then the more interesting part is like, what were the actual violations? So for bicyclists, 20% failed to yield the right of way. That's kind of a general category. It's sometimes difficult to know what exactly that means. I think it can mean a lot of different things. 18% disregarded a traffic signal, 10% drove in the opposing traffic lane. In other words, they were going the wrong way on the street. This is interesting. I mean, this is really only eight crashes, but the bicyclist was going too fast for conditions. I can see that how that might happen.
Well, and I can speak on that one a little bit. I see that one a lot. You can be going too fast for conditions at 1 mile an hour. Anytime that you ram into something or ram into somebody, an officer will say that your speed was too fast for the conditions because you ran into somebody or you ran into something. So in those 8 instances, it was probably a bicycle rear-ending a car.
Yep. I've actually
Pedestrian.
heard of crashes on Beaver, for example, where a bike rear-ended a car coming down that hill.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what drivers are doing. Fail to yield right of way, again, fairly generic, but that's 69%. Speed too fast, 6%. Made improper turns, 6%. It's tough to draw conclusions from this information because I think fail to yield right of way is a little bit too generic to understand. Now, I think distraction is a relatively recent thing that they're tracking on the crash report. And here we can see bicyclists that were distracted and drivers that were distracted. So in 20% of the cases, the bicyclist was distracted, and 22% the driver was distracted. And then 72% they weren't for bicyclists and 67% for drivers. I'm having the 20% of bicyclists that are distracted is a little bit curious to me.
I'll bet you
Daniel, this is something that
over time.
I mean, that's all self-report. I mean, if you really have to get inside the officer's head who's writing the report. So they're going to show up to the scene of an accident. They're going to say what happened. And if a person admits, I was texting, or I was reading a text, or I was reading my phone, or I was reading the newspaper, or I was looking at my speedometer, or I wasn't looking at the road. I mean, most people don't admit that. So if you don't admit that you were distracted, you go into the they mark not distracted.
Yeah,
It's only
yeah.
if you admit that you were distracted to the officers that you would fall into that category. So 20% of bicyclists said, I wasn't looking at the road. I don't know. I don't know how that could be, but that's what it says there.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Mapping
Like,
before on my phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like you're not totally paying attention because you're following the map on your phone. So I can see.
do students have headphones on? Or like, I see readers with headphones on a lot, and like noise canceling headphones, unfortunately.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
that bugs me when I see that.
Yeah, the
So
big
bad.
over-ear ones. No.
Yeah, I think Daniel made some good points about this data. It's imperfect to track, I think. See, alcohol involvement. Skip down to bikes, very low percentage, only in 6 crashes was the bicyclist suspected of having alcohol involvement, and only 2 drivers, so very low percentages in both cases. On the ped side, I think I'll just highlight that. This is pretty significant. 23% of pedestrians involved in pedestrian crashes.
It also
Oh,
aligns
this-
with the time too, right? 6 to 9 PM.
Yeah. In a more general sense, these kind of percentages track with information we've seen kind of at the state level for parts of Arizona. So I think, and there's, we don't have to go into it. I think there are probably reasons for it that, are more social in nature than infrastructure in nature, perhaps. But again, it's significant. I think what we'll do is we'll look at where these crashes are occurring. It's 23% of pedestrian crashes.
Martin, I have a general question. Does this crash data include crashes where a pedestrian or a cyclist is hit by a train?
No, it doesn't. I think that information is tracked separately. It's been information that has been, I think the police department may have a better idea of it. We don't have like a really good source of collecting that information regularly.
Right.
It's an interesting question, though.
Well, I was just thinking about fatal pedestrian crashes in the past 5 years many of them have been train
Yeah, absolutely.
related.
Yeah, they won't show up in this data. If it was a pedestrian and a train, it won't show up in this data. Okay, we're coming close to the end. It was coincidental, perhaps, that Kai brought this up, but here are hit and run crashes. It's interesting if I look at the actual data that hit and run is that flag is attached to both the pedestrian or cyclist and to the driver. So the pedestrian or the cyclist can have committed hit and run, I guess. They left the scene basically, which is less like hit and run and just leaving the scene. But for all crashes, 10% of vehicle crashes are hit and run where somebody leaves the scene, 12% of bicycle crashes, and 15% of pedestrian crashes. So slightly higher for ped and bike crashes is hit and run. And I think I need to double check, but I think we did this so it's just the driver in the ped and bike crashes. That strikes me as a little bit high, and I know we're a little bit higher than vehicle crashes, but 15% of pedestrian crashes are hit and run. That seems significant to me.
Which means the pedestrian got hit and left before the cops showed up, but the car stayed. That's,
I don't know. I think I have to, again, I have to check this data, but I think it means that the driver left the scene. The pedestrian was hit and the driver left.
that would make sense.
15%. Yeah.
So 15% of vehicle crashes that involved the pedestrian, it was a hit and run. It wasn't that the pedestrian left the scene 15% of the time. That would make more sense.
We can pull, actually, maybe in fairness, we should do that is do it both ways. So what percentage did the pedestrian leave? What percentage did the driver leave? Same for bicycle crashes. Okay, I think we're down to the last one. Action before a crash is what the driver or the pedestrian or the bicyclist were doing just before the crash. And so here you can see for pedestrians, 77% were crossing a street. 10% were walking along the street. 5% were standing or lying. 8% were other. And for drivers, 46% were going straight. 31% were making a left turn. 17% were making a right turn. We do the same for bikes.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Bicyclists, 47% were going straight, 31% were crossing, 4% were turning. I'll double check this. This seems kind of interesting to me that so many were crossing. Crossing and turning seem to be very similar to me in terms of the action.
Well, does that mean like you could be going straight at an intersection and or you're crossing that intersection?
That's what it seems like.
Yes, yeah. You're right, Kevin. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
So then you're going straight at an intersection, they're turning right and not looking at you and bang.
Yes, and that kind of tracks when we look at the driver action. 41% were making a right turn. 30% going straight, 22% were making a left turn.
Yeah.
So overall, like 63% are making a left or a right turn.
Yeah.
Drivers in ped crashes.
Yeah, that aligns with some of the stuff I've seen too, like.
Yeah. So we did it once before informally, but we'll do it again. But we'll take this 41% of drivers that are making a right turn and map that to see if there are hotspots where that's occurring.
That's great.
That needs to be pulled out.
Do you look at that in connection to the intersection design? Like just thinking about how many of them were uncontrolled intersections from the previous data point?
I think that could be a follow-up. Like what is it about that? Are they signalized intersections?
Right. Yeah, I would think that could be relevant. Like it seems maybe less likely that you would hit someone while making a right turn if you're a driver, if you stopped at a stop sign before making that right turn, versus if you're at an intersection like Ponderosa and Route 66, where to your mind you have a green light and you can make a turn.
Another thing that I think is something to consider that I've kind of noticed, like we'll take the Route 66 trail again. Both bicyclists go both ways on that path, right? So when a bicyclist is going the opposite mode of traffic, the driver is not looking as they're looking right, they're looking left. And so there are some paths, I think, around town where we almost need to put yield signs in certain areas because the bicyclists are going to get hit because cars are not looking right or looking right. They're looking left and they're turning right and they're not looking right because they're right on red. And so they're not seeing those bikes when they're coming in the opposite direction on those foot trails. So.
Yeah, and I'd propose that the pedestrians face the same thing. They're just not carrying the same speed as bicyclists, but
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
they encounter the same threat at intersections that vehicles turning right.
Yep.
Aren't looking in that direction for peds or bikes. Um, bikes may have it a little bit worse in that case because they're carrying more speed. So even if a driver does give a glance, they may glance, there's no bike, they go, there is a bike because the bike has gone, has gotten there much faster.
Another thing to think about is the intersections that have a right turn only for vehicles. There's usually a dotted line before that dedicated right turn lane for where the sign says yield to bicyclists in the dotted line. So the bicyclists are separated from that right turn only. If that's a significant protection for bicyclists, it might be worth advocating for more dedicated right turn lanes.
Yeah, it definitely takes that right hook crash out of the equation.
Although I have seen at some intersections like that, like Beaver and Butler, as you're approaching it, you can also get hit while you're going straight if people are trying to move into the right turn lane.
Yep.
So then you wouldn't get hit in the intersection.
Before the intersection.
It'd be before the intersection. But I still think it's a great point. It would be worth looking at if that helps or if the danger just sort of moves further back from the intersection.
It would at least be counted differently in this.
Yeah, it would at least look different, because I know I've seen people almost get hit at that approaching the Beaver Butler intersection because cars back up and they're trying to get to the right lane and they don't check for bikes approaching behind them.
And I know just from, beyond safety, but just looking at comfort, that movement of having vehicles merge across the bike lane and then having bikes continue in the bike lane, but being between two lanes of traffic is uncomfortable for a lot of cyclists, which is kind of the interesting area where something may be reasonably safe, but very uncomfortable anyway. Well, I think that's it for that item. Again, we'll go back, do a little bit more detailed work, fill in some of the text and bring it back to you. I'm happy to move on, but I'll leave one more opportunity for any, if anybody has any final thoughts, questions, comments.
Martin, this is just a random thought because I was at a presentation earlier today where someone was presenting about the rise of e-bikes in Flagstaff and sort of tourist use of e-bikes. In these crash reports, do they make note of whether the person involved in the crash or the people involved in the crash, if they're from here or not? Because I know when I've been around town, people have expressed concern to me, maybe also to other folks here, about people from out of town riding e-bikes like the wrong way down the street or, just not knowing traffic patterns and getting hurt. I don't know if that's actually a concern. I'm just curious if you have any data, if you could even answer that question of whether or not there's sort of disparities in crashes for locals versus people who may be less familiar with the streets.
We have that data. I think in the more detailed version of the crash data that we get, it tells us. I'd have to look for sure. I think it may have the zip code of the people involved in a crash. So we can plumb that and see if we can pull that information out and see if we can see what percentage of crashes were local zip codes and what percentage of crashes weren't.
I think it could just be kind of interesting as a
Yeah.
data point, especially around like public education campaigns or if we see that hotspots are hotspots for
Yeah.
locals
traffic painting signs or.
Yeah, exactly. Signage, other stuff like that, where people who live here are familiar and people who don't.
18 to 24 in the month of September
Yeah.
on campus.
I'm just saying.
What do you mean there's 17 of them? Makes no sense. All from
I think,
California.
I think that's an interesting question to pursue. I think, I suspect, Sam, that what will be left unsatisfying about it will be, you won't know percentages of people that do it. Like, for example, if it shows a very small percentage of people from out of town, we don't know how closely that matches the percentage of bicyclists who are from out of town. However, if there's a significant percentage of bike crashes involve people from out of town, I think that we could probably assume that that's significant. Okay, either the room is on mute or we've run out of things to say about that item.
Well, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that part of the presentation. Any more discussion on that? I mean, what's that quote about statistics? Make them say whatever you want.
67% are made up.
Urban trails and bikeways map for portable devices.
See if I can,
You gonna present from your iPhone?
yeah. Yeah, it's not quite the same if it's not on your phone, but hopefully you are able to open that on your phone and give it a look. I just wanted to show that to you and ask you, what do you think would be, how do you think this could be made most useful for people for using it? So think in terms of two things. One is there's this drop down which works on your phone as well. You can turn different layers on and off. Like if I want to see the Arizona Trail, we can add that. If I want to see where steep sections are, we can add that. If I'm only interested in foots and not bikeways, I can take that off. And we put a handful of things on here, like trailheads, drinking fountains. One thing I think would be interesting to add, but I'm not quite sure how to collect this data, is repair stations that are around town. Anybody have any? Do we know where they all are? Can we make a list of all of them? Can we get something comprehensive?
There's that one out by Fort Tut Hill.
Kickstand Cafe.
Yeah.
Pancake one? Where? Pancake?
One at Bushmaster
No.
Park. I mean, they're.
Sure.
One outside Bike Rev, right?
Oh, bike.
Oh, yeah, bike
Okay.
ride, yeah.
Shore Park? Oh, sorry, I mean Wheeler Park. Is somebody writing all these down?
No.
I am. I think I got Sport Tut Hill, Kickstand, Bike Rev, Wheeler Park. Is there another one that we were
Absolute Bikes.
absolutely?
Does Absolute have one?
Hmm?
Absolute has one too?
Yeah.
Is there one on NAU somewhere?
Here.
There has been one. We can double check. I think there is one there.
One near the Union. Isn't there one at the Union?
I think so. I can't remember if all the tools got taken off of it.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a good point. If it's a working one or not, that's a whole different situation.
Would like significant bike parking facilities be possible to add, or is that too many?
We could do that. I mean, I think the advantage of kind of being somewhat interactive is that somebody could turn that on when they need it and turn it off the rest of the time.
I think that would be useful.
How would you determine significant?
I mean, that's why. I'm
know
just
it when
posing
you
this
see
to
it.
you.
Algorithm,
What are the
I don't know.
vibes that this
Maybe
park
a rack that
gives?
can fit more than 4 bikes, let's say. But you know, like the library, the public library bike rack, people
Yeah.
use those really heavily. There's the new ones, but across from the Orpheum, there's significant ones on campus. But I mean, after that, you're getting into like sad single
Yes.
shapes that people want.
Like kicked over a bunch of
Yeah.
times.
Or that aren't actually bolted to the sidewalk, so you could actually pick them up and walk away with them.
And Martin, I don't know if this is a possibility, but I always find it useful on these mapping apps to know, like have a blue dot where I am.
Yes, you can do that with this one. Yeah.
And
Um,
I did have to toggle it on.
Oh, yeah, you
That
gotta turn it on.
default.
okay,
Allow those.
Yeah.
cool.
the other thing I think, you can tell me what you think of this idea. I'm not sure if we can do it, but routing of some sort, like it knows your location. If you put in where you want to go, like Google does, and gives you a route to take.
Yeah,
On all
let's see.
bike paths, that's amazing. That would be amazing.
So I'm not sure. We'd have to explore to see if that's possible. I think we're gonna have to check with risk management to see if there's any exposure for the city and kind of provided that information. Because we're making judgment about what routes are best for a cyclist based on some algorithm without necessarily being able to kind of double check.
Are bikeways all
Doing
like
something.
in road lanes? What is a bikeway for the purpose of this map?
I just clicked the
Um,
location.
Yeah, it depends. These are the bikeway types.
I got it,
There's,
got it. I have some other setting I need to
Yeah, you
change,
got
like
it.
a privacy setting.
I don't know, but I broke it. All right.
There an overlay of the most dangerous intersections.
Yeah, you're the dot. Is that my dot?
I think that was-
I searched up like, RNA auto.
It's like super zoomed in. There you go. Did break.
I broke it.
Okay, we'll add those few pieces of data, and let's bring it back to the next meeting, and give it, if you haven't already, like give it a look and think about how it will be useful. Like what would convince you to use this if you're biking around Flagstaff? And imagine you're either new here or new to cycling. Kind of put yourself in that perspective.
If you could do trip planning, could it also do estimated times?
TBD. Well, we'll see if we can explore that a little bit. I think, then you're into kind of a Google thing, but
Yeah.
technology exists.
I have this,
Location that did it. Interesting.
and
That's
where
all
is, and where would you get this link from if you were, if you didn't have the agenda?
Yeah.
Well,
I thi-
URL.
Is it, yeah, gis.flagstaff.az.gov/apps/web. The last part's gonna get real.
No answer to that.
yeah, I don't know. We'll have to, a shorter URL. It sounds like, and I'm not sure where we would put it. It could be like a QR code on like foot signs, for example, or on other, places like that. Um, if it were shorter and could, be more like a jingle or a meme, I mean, maybe that would help.
Like by bike.
This is great, yeah. I mean, versus not having anything, this is awesome.
Yeah, believe it or not, we still give away a lot of foots maps. So, I mean, at some level, people find that information useful.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, but will this be available from like a QR code or something? Like where are people accessing it?
It could be, yeah. I mean, I think it could be a QR code easily, but then like where is a QR code is the follow-up question. Like where would we post that? Intersections on the pavement? Yeah.
Or could it just be an app?
I think so, but I'm not sure I understand how all that works.
Yeah, I think I definitely like the idea of like, yeah, it's a tough question, like where would you put it? But it's like, it's only as useful if, someone's able to access it and it's, if you see it, if you're like on your commute and there's like, hey, scan this QR code if you're lost. Yeah, just thought.
Yeah, it's great.
We'll explore a few of those things and maybe have some better answers when we come back.
Next on the agenda is the. What's wrong? Did we get through the agenda? I think so. Old business? It's amazing. What kind of old business we looking at? Concluding general business, reports and updates. You guys want to run through some updates real quick? I was saying before the meeting started that construction has started on the overpass. I saw that announcement. That was exciting. I guess that wasn't a question, so.
Come back.
How are we doing on Kaibab Lane?
Nothing really to report on that.
Ethical Advisory Committee meeting.
Pedestrian recall bicycle signal detection in operation?
We got an update from Kevin earlier during announcements.
Okay, yes.
That's what that setting is called. That configuration is called, by the way, is pedestrian recall. If you don't have to hit the button and the walk sign comes on.
Okay. Good to know. Any of these jump out that you have an update for us or you want to update us on? Asphalt. Yeah. We have a shout for asphalt.
Yeah, we would all like that.
Asphalt. So the city is working on getting a contract together for a firm to do the work this summer. We have some better preliminary costs for the work, and we think we can afford a more robust treatment for more trails. So originally we thought we had kind of two treatment categories. One was to replace the whole trail if it was bad enough with new asphalt. And the other treatment was to mill the top layer, treat the cracks, and then put a new top layer on. And we think we'll be able to do more of the first one, which is just replace the whole trail with new asphalt, which we can also get an asphalt that is more suited for trails, so it should last longer. Part of the process of replacing the trail involves recompacting, reestablishing a base, and that should help as well. That I think one common form of asphalt failure is because the base gets undermined or wasn't compacted properly or develops gaps or has some other issues. So we'll be able to know that we're starting with a proper base for all the new trails. And that in combination with having asphalt that's designed specifically for trails. In other words, it's going to be softer than asphalt that we use for roads because it doesn't have to be as durable. Between those two things, I think we'll see better performance for our asphalt trails moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget if I mentioned this at the last meeting, but I was riding on the Lone Tree one, to get to CCC from downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And the zip ties on my spoke lights snapped because it was so bumpy. So like just debris is like flying off my bike.
Yeah,
No
that's
matter.
CCC trail.
It's
Very rough.
It's bad. Thank
Maybe
you.
we need like a social media campaign that like fill in, like we'll start with this trail is so rough that, and you fill some.
Zip tie snapping rough.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
I have to call it early.
Is this early or is this?
Wonderful. The new time to be. I love it.
You guys, thank you for your engagement. Anybody's, do you have to vote on ending the meeting or just go for it? What do I do here, Martin?
You can end the meeting by consensus, so you don't need a vote. As long as nobody objects to you ending the meeting, you're free to end the meeting.
I object to ending the meeting. Okay, no objections.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
See you guys
Thanks
next.
all.
Bye.
Thanks for coming, David.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate
Good to be
it.
here. Yeah.
And,
Good to have you here.
Bauman was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone.
Ready to go? We're gonna